What is happening, people? Welcome back to another video. As ever, if you're new here, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I've been told it helps the algorithm. But without further ado, let's talk about what I want to talk about today, which is we'll start off with Jai Opetaia and his dominant performance over Brandon Glanson. But unlucky for Jai, we should be talking about his performance and how well he can do in the cruiserweight division and how he might be able to step up to heavyweight one day, but as ever, it's his sort of performance and victories shrouded by factors that maybe are outside of his control because of his dispute with the IBF. Now, um, Jaya Pataya has reportedly paid the sanctioning fees for the fight against Brandon Glanton to be declared for the IBF belt, but apparently, given the way in which the IBF belt was, um, you know, situated at the time and how, um, it looked in comparison to the Zuffa belt, they decided to not sanction the bout. And it brings into question as to whether, you know, how the sanctioning bodies will fare alongside the Zuffa belt. This was the first test, and yeah, it's not looking good for fighters, and it's not looking good for the perception of the sport because this Zuffa belt, I guess, was brought in to get rid of all the animosity and all the um I guess the politics that come with having multiple sanctioning bodies. Instead of there being an WBC, IBF, WBO, WBA belt or champion. Instead, there's going to be a Zuffa champion. But I mean, that sort of backfired. A Zuffa or a Ring Magazine belt, because Ring Magazine is an interesting proposition. Um, they're a magazine, but they're also operating like a sanctioning body, as is evidenced by the Ring Magazine belt. But it's just adding more confusion, I guess. So that's something that it needs to be sorted out. But in relation to Opetaia's victory over Brandon Glanson, I guess it was a one-sided affair that many people assumed would happen. Right, it was always the case that Opetaia would win, and the way in which he won was in devastating fashion. I'm sure a lot of people um, would have expected Opetaia to dispatch of Brandon Glanson in a way that um, was a lot quicker, a lot faster than he did. Maybe many people thought it wouldn't go the 12 rounds as it did, but I mean, I guess given all the sort of everything that was riding on this fight, and everything that Optai had to come during fight week, I guess you can't be too mad at his performance. He did what he had to do. He won. And where does this leave him? He's in a very awkward position now because obviously he's now a Zuffa champion. Um, would again for I guess for someone to fight Jai Pitaya now, it'd have to be a heck of a lot of money, given the sort of strain and given the um animosity towards the other sanctioning bodies. So if a fighter wants to fight Opetaia for the belt, and a big name fighter, and there's plenty of them out there in the cruiserweight division, Benavides, um, Zoto Ramirez, Chris Billum Smith. There's a lot of people there. And I think it's going to take a lot of money for anyone to fight Opetaia, especially now considering the situation he is in. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's where it is, right? They're gonna have to cough up a lot of money, and I guess there's got to also be a resolve between Zuffa and the other sanctioning bodies, because if another fighter decides to fight for this belt, and they fall short or whatever, how does that leave their relationship with the other bodies? I mean, it's a mess, and it needs to be fixed for the benefit of the fighters. Because at the end of the day, I mean, they're the ones getting in the ring, and they're the ones taking the punishment, and they're the ones that are gonna have to live with their decisions for the rest of their lives. So yeah, I think a lot more respect needs to be put on fighters and what they are going through. Anyway, I wanted to talk as well about about MVP promotions because it's come to my attention, and this has gone a little bit under the radar in the UK at least, is that they've signed a long-term partnership to bring women's boxing back to ESPN. Now, this is quite interesting because ESPN signed a very hefty deal with Bob Arum's Top Rank, who I was reading quite a lot about, and it's quite interesting to hear about his story and his sort of journey into the sport. He started off as Bob Arum did. He started off as an attorney, and then got introduced to Muhammad Ali through the famous footballer Jim Brown, and Ali wanted him to promote his fights. Bob Arum did, and the rest is history. He's now promoted in excess of 2,000 fights, and at 93, 94 years old, he's still going. He's still going strong. But in 2025, his deal with ESPN came to an end, and they weren't going to renew that deal. Now Top Rank is left without a broadcast platform, and if you watch my previous videos, you know how I preach about how important it is for a promoter to have a broadcaster, to have someone helping them fund their sort of endeavors and promotional company. But anyway, Top Rank didn't have one, and ESPN. It seemed that they were walking away from the sport. They had their fingers in all sorts of other pies, and I guess they saw boxing as an opportunity that wouldn't bring the fruits that they thought it brought in the past. But that has now changed because Jake Paul signed a major deal with ESPN. It's a long-term deal which is going to bring boxing back to the platform, and they also have a relationship. That's a 3-year deal up until 2028, and it also marks the beginning of a strategic relationship between Madison Square Garden Entertainment and MVP and ESPN. So essentially, a lot of the events that we're going to see going forward are going to be in women's boxing, broadcasted on ESPN and at the Madison Square Garden. Um, and look, I mean, Jake Paul, love him or hate him, Nikita Badarian, love him or hate him, they have really done very well to get to the position that they are in. And when they first entered the sport and they were first sort of you know suggesting that they were going to go down the women's boxing route, and that they were going to hold it to higher claim, that they were going to be that they were going to put it on as a co-main event. They had a lot of sort of backlash from major TV promoters because I guess they didn't see the value in women's boxing. But MVP, credit to them, they did, and they've been involved in some great fights. Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano, they've signed a lot of the top MVP prospects, and they're in a very healthy position. They've also got their broadcast agreement with Sky Sports here in the UK. They've that's going to happen on the 5th of April, so not long to go now as well. And it's also got a deal with ESPN. So they're doing really well, and credit to them, because they saw an opportunity that many did and that many didn't, or many didn't act upon. So yeah, credit to them. Um, and it'll be interesting to see how ESPN interacts with um other sort of promoters going forward. Uh is this just their boxing content, or are they going to you know try and get into the trying to sign other promoters? Are they going to you know bid for more broadcasting rights? Are they going to enter the sport in another way? And it'll be interesting to see if they do, if they don't. And with regards to Bob Arum, quickly, I mean, look, he's a veteran in the sport, and I guess he doesn't have the star power as he once did. This guy had the likes of Terence Crawford, Floyd Mayweather, um, before he bought himself out of his contract. He's promoted us to Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, Rumble in the Jungle, Thriller in Manila, and for him to no longer have a broadcast deal, something's gone wrong. Has it been a case where he's taken his eye off the ball and he hasn't really adapts to the times, or is it just one of those situations where he's come to the end of um his boxing career? Who knows? But anyway, it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. But thank you guys so much for watching.